Hello and welcome back to English Plus Podcast, and our theme for this week, Mind Matters, Understanding Brain Disorders. In our journey so far, we've established a crucial foundation. The brain is a biological organ, one that can experience illness just like any other part of the body. Then, through the story of Sarah, we witness the profound human cost of stigma, the isolating silence that descends when an inner struggle is met with external misunderstanding. Today we're becoming cartographers. We are unrolling a vast, intricate map of a territory that is at once intimately familiar and yet, for many, entirely unknown. The landscape of the mind itself. For too long, our understanding of brain disorders has been a blurry, intimidating expanse labeled with ominous-sounding terms and shrouded in misconception. The goal of today's episode is to bring that map into focus. We're going to draw the borders, name the major continents, and chart the terrain of the most common categories of brain disorders. This isn't about memorizing a list of symptoms, not at all. This is about building a framework for understanding. We all experience the geography of our minds every day. We have our sunny emotional highlands, our foggy valleys of worry, our moments of sharp focus, and our periods of frustrating distraction. But for some, the climate in these regions is extreme and persistent. The fog never lifts. The emotional weather becomes a hurricane. The distraction isn't a fleeting state, but a fundamental way of being. To navigate this, we need a guide. We need to ask the right questions. What is the substantive biological difference between a bad mood that lasts a few days and a clinical mood disorder that can last for months or even years? Is anxiety simply an overabundance of worry, a personality quirk, or is it a specific, measurable malfunction in the brain's ancient, hardwired threat detection system? When we talk about conditions like ADHD and autism, are we discussing childhood behavioral issues that can be fixed or outgrown? Or are we describing fundamental, lifelong variations in the very architecture of the brain? And in the most poignant of journeys, how does the brain, the very seat of our identity and memories, begin to lose its own map in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's? Today we provide a primer, an introductory atlas to those vast territories. Please know that each of the categories we discuss today is a field of study unto itself, worthy of entire libraries. So, our purpose here is not to provide an exhaustive encyclopedia. It's impossible, by the way, not in one podcast episode, not even an entire podcast that goes on for years. Because, my friends, as I always say, true knowledge can never be gained through shortcuts, and I'm not giving you a shortcut. I can't. It's built through dedicated, long-term reading and rigorous research. So consider this episode your orientation. I'm giving you a compass, a legend for the map, and the basic vocabulary you'll need to embark on your own deeper explorations. Of course, if you're interested in one of these things that we're going to talk about, I highly encourage that you pursue it. Who knows, you might even pursue it professionally if you're that interested. But anyway, let's get back to our episode for today. Get ready to journey with me. We're about to explore the emotional, cognitive, and biological landscapes that define so much of the human experience. This is a map of the mind. Welcome, my friends, to the third episode of our theme for this week, Mind Matters, Understanding Brain Disorders. We started with the why we should see the brain as an organ. We moved to the who, witnessing the lived experience of stigma through Sarah's story. Today we tackle the what. What are the major categories of brain disorders? Now think of this episode as a guided tour through a vast and diverse national park. The park is the human brain, and the different categories of disorders are the distinct ecosystems within it. The towering mountains, the dense forests, the volatile geyser fields, the winding rivers. Each has its own rules, its own climate, its own unique features. Our job today is to act as park rangers, guiding you through 4 of the most significant of these territories. Now, quick but important disclaimer, these categories are human-made. They are our best attempt to organize a profoundly complex and often overlapping reality. In the real world, the borders are often blurry. A person can, and often does, experience conditions from multiple categories at once, a phenomenon known as comorbidity. But for the sake of understanding, these classifications are an invaluable starting point. So let's begin our tour in a region defined by its dramatic and often turbulent emotional climate. Let's explore mood disorders. Everyone experiences moods. We feel happy, we feel sad, we feel irritable. These are the normal, fluctuating weather patterns of our emotional lives. A mood disorder, however, isn't just weather. It's a fundamental disruption of the entire climate control system. Imagine the thermostat in your brain that regulates your emotional temperature is broken. It's either stuck on freezing, stuck on boiling, or it's swinging wildly between the two extremes with no regard for the actual temperature outside. The two most prominent landscapes in this territory are major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. Now let's start with major depressive disorder, or MDD. Now it's often just called clinical depression. The cardinal misconception about MDD is that it's just being really sad. Sadness, on its own, is a healthy, normal human emotion, usually a response to a loss or a difficult event. Clinical depression, on the other hand, is a pervasive, suffocating state that often has no discernible external cause. The sadness of depression is a profound, hollow ache. But perhaps the most defining feature of MDD is something called anhedonia, which is a clinical term for the loss of pleasure. It's the inability to feel joy in things you once loved. Your favorite food tastes like ash. A beautiful sunset is just a collection of colors. The company of loved ones feels like a chore. It's as if the world has been drained of all its color, leaving only shades of gray. But it's not just an emotional state. It's a deeply physical one. Depression is exhausting. It manifests as a leaden fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. It can cause changes in appetite and weight, either eating far more or far less. It creates a cognitive fog, making concentration and decision-making feel like wading through mud, just as we saw with Sarah in the previous episode. Biologically, we're looking at a complex dysregulation. It involves key neurotransmitters, the brain's chemical messengers that you've likely heard of. Serotonin, which helps regulate mood, sleep, and appetite. Norepinephrine, which is involved in alertness and energy. And dopamine, which is crucial for motivation and the experience of pleasure. In MDD, the signaling in these systems is often disrupted. But it's not just a simple chemical imbalance. It's more about the function of entire brain circuits. Areas like the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and emotional regulation, may be underactive. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, may be chronically overactive, trapping a person in a state of persistent negativity and stress. Now let's travel to the other side of this territory, to a condition defined by its volatility: bipolar disorder. If depression is the thermostat stuck on cold, bipolar disorder is the thermostat gone haywire, swinging from freezing to boiling. It's characterized by dramatic shifts between two poles: depression and what we call mania, or a less intense version called hypomania. The depressive episodes in bipolar disorder look very much like MDD. The same deep sadness, anhedonia, and fatigue. The defining feature, however, is the manic episodes. It is a colossal mistake to think of mania as simply being really happy or having a great mood. Mania is a dangerously elevated state. It's characterized by a decreased need for sleep. A person might go for days on only an hour or two and feel completely energized. Their thoughts race, jumping from idea to idea so quickly that their speech can become rapid and difficult to follow. They experience a flood of energy and often engage in impulsive, high-risk behaviors like spending sprees, reckless driving, making life-altering decisions on a whim. There's an inflated sense of self-esteem, a feeling of being invincible, brilliant, and destined for greatness. While it might feel euphoric at first, mania can quickly spiral into paranoia, irritability, and psychosis, where a person loses touch with reality. Bipolar disorder is fundamentally a disorder of energy and regulation. The biological underpinnings are still being intensely researched, but they point to issues in how the brain manages its energy rhythms. There are disruptions in the circuits that connect the prefrontal cortex to deeper limbic structures like the amygdala. It's as if the regulatory brakes of the brain are completely failing, allowing emotional and energetic states to accelerate to dangerous and unsustainable speeds before inevitably crashing back down into depression. So, that's the first part. We talked about the emotional climate, the mood disorders. Next, we're going to talk about the threat detection systems, the anxiety disorders. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. Now, before I continue drawing the map, let me tell you about the series that is almost done. I'm sorry, just like I was too eager yesterday to tell you that it might start today or yesterday, obviously. But I'm afraid it's gonna take a little bit more because I have to do some more research into specific areas. This is a very sensitive topic, and I want to make sure that I have researched the topic thoroughly. But I hope I start this series next week or the week after tops. And I'm going to try to control myself next time not to announce something before I'm 100% sure that it's done. But with that being said, let's get back to our episode for today and let's talk about the threat detection system, the anxiety disorders. Now let's leave the world of emotional climate and move to our next ecosystem, one governed by the ancient primal instincts of fear and survival. Welcome to the territory of anxiety disorders. Now, a certain amount of anxiety is not only normal, it's essential for our survival. It's the internal alarm system that tells you to jump out of the way of a speeding car or study for a big exam. It keeps you safe. An anxiety disorder occurs when that alarm system becomes faulty. Imagine the smoke detector in your house. A good smoke detector goes off when there's a real fire. A faulty one goes off every time you make toast. It screams fire with the same intensity for a minor inconvenience as it would for a genuine catastrophe. People with anxiety disorders are living with a brain that has a hypersensitive, overactive smoke detector. Let's look at two examples. First, there's the generalized anxiety disorder, or the GAD. As the name implies, the anxiety here is generalized. It's not tied to a specific thing like spiders or heights. It's a chronic, excessive, and free-floating worry about, everything. Finances, health, work, relationships, the state of the world. A person with GAD lives in a perpetual state of what if. Their mind is constantly scanning the horizon for potential threats, and it finds them everywhere. But this isn't just a mental state. It's physically exhausting. It comes with muscle tension, restlessness, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating because the brain is spending all its resources running these disaster simulations. It's like having dozens of browser tabs open in your mind at all times, all of them playing a scary movie. So that was about the generalized anxiety disorder. But then there is panic disorder. Now, if GAD is a constant low-grade hum of anxiety, a panic attack is a sudden, terrifying siren. A panic attack is an abrupt, overwhelming surge of intense fear that seems to come out of nowhere. The body's fight or flight system kicks into overdrive. The heart pounds, you can't catch your breath, you might feel dizzy, chest pains, a choking sensation. Many people who have a panic attack for the first time genuinely believe they are having a heart attack or dying. It's one of those most frightening experiences a person can have. Now, having a single panic attack doesn't mean you have panic disorder. The disorder itself is the persistent, debilitating fear of having another attack. This fear leads to avoidance. People start avoiding places or situations where they'd had an attack before, or where they worry they might have one. Their world can become smaller and smaller until they are trapped by the fear of their own body's alarm system. Now, biologically, anxiety disorders are heavily linked to the amygdala, that small almond-shaped structure we mentioned earlier. It's the brain's threat detection center, the core of the smoke detector. In anxiety disorders, the amygdala is often hyper-responsive. It sends a danger signal to the rest of the brain, particularly the brainstem and the hypothalamus, which then trigger the physical fight or flight response, even when the threat is just a thought or a memory. The prefrontal cortex, which is supposed to act as the rational, all-clear signal to calm the amygdala down, is often less effective in this process. The alarm is screaming, and the part of the brain that's supposed to turn it off isn't doing its job properly. So, my friends, that in a nutshell, of course, is about the threat detection system anxiety disorders. And as I told you, I'm not going to tell you anything about the series, but I promise you we will talk about a lot more in this series of 20 brain disorders, what they are not. We're going to bust some myths about them. We're going to talk about what to do and what not to do, and when to seek professional help. And this is very important because, after all, we are not professionals. This is going to be just the Allies playbook. That's all. It's not a replacement of professional help. But anyway, we talked about anxiety disorders. Let's talk next about the brain's architecture, about neurodevelopmental disorders. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Our third stop is a fundamentally different kind of territory. We're not talking about a climate control system or an alarm system that has become dysregulated. Here we are talking about the very blueprint of the park, the fundamental architecture of the brain itself. Welcome to neurodevelopmental disorders. These are conditions that arise from differences in how the brain develops and is wired from birth. This is an absolutely crucial distinction. They are not behavioral problems. They are not the result of bad parenting, and they are not childhood phases to be outgrown. They are lifelong neurological differences. The best analogy here is to think of brain operating systems. Most of the world runs on a neurological equivalent of Windows. Let's call it neurotypical. But some people are running Mac OS. Others are running Linux. None of these operating systems is inherently wrong or broken. They are just different. They have different strengths, different weaknesses, and they process information in different ways. Forcing a Mac OS brain to function exactly like a Windows brain in a world built for Windows is going to lead to a lot of friction and frustration. That being said, let's talk about the very first one, the one that we've all heard about, but I'm very sad to say that very few of us know what it means, or what it really means. And there's definitely an entire episode about it in the series. Let's talk about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or what is known as ADHD. Now, the name itself is a bit of a misnomer. People with ADHD don't have a deficit of attention. They have difficulty with the regulation of attention. Their brain's director or air traffic controller is inconsistent. This is largely tied to the functioning of the prefrontal cortex and its relationship with the neurotransmitter dopamine. This part of the brain is in charge of what we call executive functions: planning, organization, impulse control, emotional regulation, and directing focus. In the ADHD brain, the dopamine signaling system that powers these functions is less efficient. This means their attention is often interest-driven, not importance-driven. They can hyperfocus for hours on something they find fascinating, but find it nearly impossible to initiate a boring but important task. This isn't a moral failing. It's a matter of neurological wiring. ADHD presents in different ways, from the classic hyperactive impulsive type to the inattentive type, formerly ADD, which is often missed in girls and women who may appear quiet and daydreamy rather than disruptive. So again, my friends, I know I've said that like 100 times, but we're going to talk about that in detail in the series. But that's in a nutshell what it is. Next, let's discuss ASD, or Autism Spectrum Disorder. The key word here is spectrum, and it's not a linear spectrum from less autistic to more autistic. It's more like a color wheel, a constellation of traits where every autistic person has their own unique profile. The core features of ASD involve persistent differences in social communication and interaction, and the presence of restricted interests and repetitive behaviors. The autistic brain processes the world differently. This can manifest in many ways. Social cues that are intuitive to neurotypical people might need to be learned explicitly, like learning a foreign language. They might communicate more directly and honestly, bypassing neurotypical social niceties. They often have intense, passionate interests in specific subjects, allowing them to gain a deep and encyclopedic knowledge. They may also have different sensory experiences. Lights may be brighter, sounds louder, textures more noticeable. Repetitive movements like rocking or hand flapping, often called stimming, can be a way of self-regulating a nervous system that is overwhelmed by sensory input. Autism is not a disease to be cured. And I can never stress that enough. It is not a disease to be cured. It is a fundamental and valid neurotype. It's just a different way of being human. When you think about it, trust me, you will start looking at it with a whole new light. But of course, you know what I'm gonna say, right? That we're going to talk about this in a separate episode in the series and everything. And I have a feeling now that if I don't create this series soon enough, you're going to kill me. So just out of fear, I'm going to finish it. But trust me, this is something that I strongly believe that everyone should know about. Because these 20 problems, these 20 brain disorders we're going to talk about in the series are really important to understand. And I bet that you have someone you care about in your life that may have one of these problems, and you really wish you could help. You could be there for them. And this series is all about that. Again, it's not about replacing professionals. It's not. I can't do that. Nobody can do that. Professionals are very important, but we're equipping ourselves with a guide to be better at being there for these people. Whether these are people we love, whether these are people in our families or people around us. Who knows? This might even encourage you to take this field seriously and become a professional yourself. But anyway, I promise I won't talk about the series anymore for the rest of this episode. I'm just going to talk about the next part, which is the last part of our episode today, the slow erosion. We're going to talk about neurodegenerative disorders. It's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Our final stop on this tour is perhaps the most poignant. We are now entering a territory defined not by a faulty system or a different architecture, but by a slow, progressive loss. This is the land of neurodegenerative disorders, where the very cells of the brain begin to wither and die over time. Now, if the brain is a magnificent, intricate city, these disorders are a slow-motion catastrophe that gradually darkens the lights, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood. Now let's touch briefly on two of the most well-known. First, Alzheimer's disease. Well, this is the most common cause of dementia. It's a disease that steals a person's most precious possession. It typically begins with memory loss, particularly for recent events, but it is so much more than just forgetfulness. As the disease progresses, it erodes language, judgment, and the ability to perform basic daily tasks. The person can become confused, disoriented, and experience profound personality changes. At the microscopic level, the Alzheimer's brain is marked by two key culprits. The first are amyloid plaques, which are sticky clumps of protein that build up between nerve cells, disrupting communication. The second are tau tangles, which are twisted fibers of another protein that build up inside cells, choking them from within. As more and more brain cells are damaged and die, the brain tissue itself physically shrinks. I might add something here, but I'm not going to say it because you know exactly what I'm going to say, okay? Something related to the series, right? Okay, let's move on to the next one, and the final one I'm going to talk about in today's episode. Let's consider Parkinson's disease. Now, while Alzheimer's is primarily known as a disease of cognition, Parkinson's is known as a disease of movement. The classic symptoms are physical: a resting tremor, rigid muscles, and slow shuffling movements. This is caused by the progressive death of dopamine-producing neurons in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. This area is a critical hub for controlling movement. As these dopamine factories shut down, the body's ability to initiate and control smooth, purposeful motion is lost. But reinforcing our central theme that everything in the brain is connected, Parkinson's is not just a motor disorder. As the disease progresses, it can also lead to a host of non-motor symptoms, including depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, and eventually cognitive impairment and dementia. The loss of dopamine doesn't just affect movement, it affects mood, motivation, and thinking. Now, of course, my friends, I know that we've just scratched the surface. No more, no less. And of course, there's a lot more to be talked about, but I hope I just gave you an introduction of 4 different types of brain disorders. And of course, as always, if you want to know more about any of these things, trust me, there's no shortcut. Don't search for a podcast episode or a YouTube video that's going to tell you everything you need to know. I mean, yeah, there are some good videos, there are some good podcast episodes, I hope like this one, that can tell you something about these disorders, but if you really want to understand them, you have to dig deeper. You have to read not just a couple of pages, you have to read a lot. You have to understand the human brain for what it is, and then understand what's not going right or what's going differently in this brain that's causing a brain disorder. I mean, to be honest with you, sometimes I feel that in the age we live in where knowledge seems to be abundant, available to everyone, it's getting further and further away because we are under the illusion that we can become experts at anything with just a couple of hours, or even worse, with some people with just a couple of minutes with those shorts. But anyway, I'm not here to judge. I'm just telling you, if you're interested, you have to do the work. You have to do your own due diligence to really understand what we're talking about. But anyway, we come to the end of our tour, and we've covered a lot of ground today. From the turbulent climate of mood disorders and the faulty alarms of anxiety disorders to the unique architecture of neurodevelopmental disorders and the heartbreaking erosion of neurodegenerative disorders. My hope is that this map, however simplified, has provided some clarity. I hope it has replaced vague, scary-sounding labels with a more concrete understanding of the biological processes at play. And knowing that anxiety is tied to the amygdala or that ADHD is a matter of executive function doesn't make these conditions any less challenging to live with, but it does allow us to see them for what they are: real, legitimate medical conditions rooted in the most complex organ we know. It allows us to shift our perspective from judgment to curiosity, and from fear to compassion. This map, my friends, is your first step. Now the deeper exploration begins. Thank you for taking this tour with me. I'm Danny, and this was another episode from English Plus Podcast, another episode from our theme for this week, Mind Matters, Understanding Brain Disorders. We still have 2 more episodes for this theme. Tomorrow we're going to talk about something that is very interesting, and that has to do with the English part, with the language part that is related in how we talk about these disorders. So you don't want to miss that. That's coming tomorrow. But for now, that's everything I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for listening. And remember, if you want to unlock everything I post on English Plus Podcast and on the website EnglishPlusPodcast.com, you can do that by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. I'm gonna be honest with you, sometimes it's not just about what you get, and you can consider subscribing as means of support for my channel, for myself, for the thing I'm advocating for. It's not just knowledge, it's not just English, it's pure curiosity. It's lifelong learning. That's what I'm all about. But anyway, no matter what level of engagement or support you decide on, I'm very glad to have you here. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you again next time. And don't forget, never stop learning.